Hi, welcome to another in our series, Millennial Perspectives. I'm Yehuda Sarna, and so much of the news that we hear from campuses these days has to do with controversy, flagrant anti-Semitism, discriminatory BDS resolutions, and Jewish students feeling intimidated or marginalized. On Millennial Perspectives, what we want to do is dig deeper into campus life, to give you a sense of what students themselves are experiencing, feeling, thinking, by speaking to Jewish student activists and their partners, to hear their stories, to give you a sense of their challenges and their successes, and perhaps most importantly, to give us all a chance to hear their perspectives on the social and political issues of the day. Let me introduce you to our guests on this edition of Millennial Perspectives. Gavriella Rubin is a Jewish senior at New York University studying applied psychology. Shanjida Chowdhury, who is Muslim, recently graduated New York University and is studying now for the LSATs, aspiring to become a lawyer. Together, they led an interfaith group at NYU called Bridges, which I'm sure we'll hear more about. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
So I wanted to start just by asking you a little bit about how you got to do the work that you are doing. Gavi, maybe you can tell me a little bit about where you grew up and how you came to study at NYU.
I grew up in Sacramento and predominantly was raised in a Jewish community in home, but like secular community more widespread. I went to Israel to study after high school. Ended up in New York. Who knows how? It just did. It's New York. It kind of draws you in. I was always interested in learning more about religions and groups that weren't my own. When you're surrounded by lots of Jews, you want to know what other people are doing.
And so, let's say your social circle growing up, were all your friends Jewish, or you felt like it?
So no. So I went to public school, but because I went to public school, my family was very focused on having Jewish friends. So I was always sent to lots of Jewish day camps and youth groups, stuff like that.
And did your family affiliate a particular way?
Definitely modern Orthodox, strongly.
Okay, and you decided to come to NYU. How did you make that decision? I mean, you said, I just ended up in New York. It doesn't really just happen that way.
It kind of does. I don't know, New York is exciting. It fulfilled the requirement for my parents that it had really strong Jewish community, which was also important to me. But at the time that I was applying to college, I really wasn't thinking about college. It just felt far away. It just was a place I had heard of on the East Coast, exciting new territory.
Okay, so your first few weeks at school, what was that like for you? Overwhelming, intimidating, exciting? You don't remember, it's all a blur?
What was it like? It was exciting. I remember meeting a lot of people. I don't think I'm friends with most of the people I met in the first few weeks of school, but I felt like they were going to be my best friends for the rest of my life because everything is so intense and new.
And was it natural for you to become connected to the Jewish community? Did it feel like you immediately fit in, or was that a more difficult process? Or still is more difficult process?
It's still a process. I want to say yes and no. It was the natural place for me to go because the environment on a whole is very familiar. But the community of individuals is always a process to find your place, I think. If you're growing in a religion, then the space around you also changes.
So what were the things that maybe enabled you to feel welcome or at home, or some of the things that maybe made you feel a little bit more alienated, if that's an appropriate word, or maybe you didn't experience it as alienation?
I would say the things that made me feel at home were the things like traditions, things that other students had that we could share, similar experiences like Jewish holidays, stuff like that. You experience these things the same growing up. So you come into a space where you have shared memory almost. But it's a pretty East Coast school, so the vibe is a lot different than what I was used to.
Okay, but it's more than just the weather, right?
It's more than the weather,
What's different? What's the vibe? But
the vibe. It's
it
East
sounds
Coast,
like a very
it's New
West
York,
Coast
it's
kind
like
of word. What does that mean? What does that even mean?
It means that the East Coast has, like, New York in particular, has a really specific energy that's about progress. It's about, like, movement and always doing something and going. And that definitely applies to more than just the Jewish community. It's just, like, the energy of New York City. And that's not what I was used to.
So it's not very chill.
It's not very
Not
chill.
Not chill. Okay, so Shanjida, maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you came to NYU, and also what the beginning was like for you.
Okay. So I think like my decision to come to NYU was very deliberate. So it wasn't just like, oh, I just landed at NYU. It was very deliberate. I grew up on Long Island, so I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I was born in Queens. So I remember when I was in sort of towards the end of high school, around 11th grade maybe, that's when I started to become more conscious of like my spiritual identity. And I went to a high school that didn't have a lot of Muslim students. I remember in my grade, I was the only one who started wearing a headscarf.
And that was your decision, you decided?
Yeah, it was really cool. It was a very conscious, very independent decision that I think it's great, because like I feel like I did it on my own, so no one could tell me otherwise, you know? But I remember feeling kind of unsatisfied in high school because I didn't have a large Muslim community to feel a part of. I went to a high school that was predominantly Christian, like there were a lot of South Indian Christians, so I knew that my high school had a lot of, I guess, spirituality within it. And so
It's a public high school.
Public high school, yeah, on Long Island. And there was a club called the Seekers Club, and it was like the Christian Seekers Club, so all the Christians would go there like after school once a week.
They would seek.
Yeah, like they would sing songs, and I thought it was really amazing. And so I was like, you know, we should have something like this. And I felt as though the Muslim population was kind of growing in my high school. So my senior year, me and my brother, we went to our principal and we're like, you know what, can we start a Muslim Students Association? And our principal was like super, super nice. And he was completely for the idea, and we started it. And it was great. Even I feel like we'd get like about maybe 30 people per meeting, and 15 of them would be Muslim, and the other 15 would be just Christians. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And I remember sort of getting a taste of what a spiritual community feels like, and that thirst was just growing. So I knew that when I applied to college, I wanted to go to a university that would have a space where I would feel like my spirituality could sort of take form. And so I remember I knew about Imam Khalid Latif. Like I was such a big fan since I was in high school. I knew about the Islamic Center at NYU, and so I knew I wanted to go to a school like that. So I remember when I got accepted, I was really happy. I started going to NYU, visited the Islamic Center. It was nothing like I had ever experienced before. It was incredible. It was just the most inclusive. I don't even know if this is like how can a space that is open to Muslims be so pluralistic? So that was like an interesting concept.
I mean, pluralistic in what way? I mean,
it was a space where people of any levels of faith could feel at home. So it wasn't, I mean, I feel like a lot of times mosques have a tendency to sort of alienate people who are just, you know, beginning to understand faith, or people who practice differently. Islam isn't a one-size-fits-all. I don't think any faith is. And so I felt like the IC, the Islamic Center, was just so inclusive that anyone from any level of faith could feel comfortable, and anyone of any faith could feel comfortable.
And there are people who are Sunni and Shia.
Yeah, for sure.
Who, even though in parts of the world, Sunni and Shia Muslims are sometimes even at war with each other.
Mm-hmm.
The doctrines are, some of the doctrines are different. Are the prayers different?
I mean, like, people pray differently. Yeah, there are some different prayers. But I think what's really amazing is that the Islamic Center really travels in the right direction, in the sense that we also hired a Shia chaplain recently, which I think is pretty incredible. It definitely allows people of different backgrounds to really feel at home. And I remember just feeling a lot more satisfied and feeling very happy with my decision to attend NYU. And in terms of starting interfaith work, it was just kind of by accident. I mean, I came to NYU seeking a spiritual community, and with that, I stumbled upon an interfaith community, I guess, and it happened freshman year. And so that sort of changed the course of my, not just college career, but like my life in general. So.
Wow, okay, so how did it happen?
So,
Because it sounds like Gavi just kind of drifted to New York, and it sounds like you just kind of discovered a...
Yeah, for sure. So it was my freshman year, first semester. It was the night before Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Adha is one of the two major holidays in the Muslim faith. So the night before Eid al-Adha, this club called Bridges was hosting a ladies' henna night. And a couple of upperclassmen from the Islamic Center invited me to go, and I was like, of course, I would love to get my henna done. So I went. It was at night, and it was open to ladies of the Muslim and Jewish faith. So I thought that was pretty cool. It was kind of revolutionary for me. I wasn't so interested. I mean, honestly, at that point in my life, I was just really interested in solidifying my own spiritual identity, and I wasn't really interested in, kind of like talking to people other people of other faiths in terms of, like, I was trying to meet new people, but like not with the intention of doing interfaith work, because my sort of mission at that point was to really reinforce my Muslim identity. But I went, and I met just some incredible people. I met Chelsea Garbell, who was one of the founders of Bridges, so I was in the presence of royalty, basically. And it was just such an amazing experience, because I talked to these women who were of the Jewish faith, and we just had so much in common. So I found that very, very interesting, like sometimes the struggles that I face in terms of being a Muslim woman who covers, just like small things like feeling really hot in the summer, that struggle was shared by someone who was not of my faith, and I thought that was very, very incredible and really humanized that struggle for me. And so I felt at that moment that I had a lot to learn, and that I could grow as an individual by learning about other people as well. That sort of sparked my interest. And there was a presentation about the Bridges service trip, which is basically an annual service trip that happens every winter in the course of the year. So there was a presentation about it, and the trip that year was going to be in Joplin, Missouri, to do tornado relief. And I was like, I'm going to sign up for that. So I signed up for that,
Okay,
and it was
so
incredible.
what's interesting for me is that you're at a moment in your life when you were on a religious quest, right? My guess that you were learning a lot more about Islam, and you wanted to solidify your identity as someone who is devout Muslim, and at the same time, you go to this interfaith meeting, and did it feel like that initially, like that distracted or confused, or just reinforced the journey that you were on?
Yeah, it was not a distraction. I thought it would be a distraction, so I was kind of trying to, be like, I guess, intentionally tunnel visioned almost, and just focus on doing everything related to Islam and Muslim and Islamic Center. You know what I mean? Like, I was just very trying to travel on this narrow path. But then I realized that you don't have to travel on a straight line. Like, you can kind of meander, and you can still get to an ultimate goal in a different way. And so I thought being a part of this shared experience, and I think you talked about shared experience, which I thought was like really powerful, because that really, I feel like, made me feel even more at home when I was able to see that, the struggles or the joys that I experience can be experienced by other people in different ways. And I thought that was really great. So it didn't hinder me, it didn't distract me, it just reinforced everything.
And let's say your fellow travelers, if you will, people who were on a similar religious quest, friends of yours, when they learned that you started getting involved in Bridget, did they give you a hard time? Did they support you? Did they come with you?
No, I didn't get a hard time from no one, from anyone, sorry. I remember that people would be kind of skeptical. They'd be like, what's the goal? Or, it wasn't malicious. It wasn't, oh, stop doing this. But it was more so, okay, explain to me what you're doing. And I was very happy to answer. And I think as a freshman, I was still discovering what I was doing. Now, if you ask me, I'm like, I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? If you ask me or Gavi, like, we know sort of what the goals or what the objectives are of doing interfaith work. But I think at that point in my life, it was just this novelty. It was just this new experience, and it was just so cool. And now it's still cool. It's still a great experience, but we just feel like it's necessary. It's not just a good thing.
So we'll get back to that in a second. In your high school, were there any Jewish students?
So I had one Jewish friend, but just culturally Jewish, like not a practicing Jew. So I remember watching the Of Many film, which you are the movie star of, and there was this.
I think most people who watch it actually think that you're the star.
That is not true. But I remember there was this one part, and I was a freshman at that point, so there was this one segment where I basically said that out of all the faiths in the world, the one faith that I know the least about was Judaism, and I think that's like the complete opposite now. Like,
Shanjida knows so much about Judaism.
Yeah, like I took a class called Jewish Mysticism and Hasidism this past semester. It was like the best class I ever took.
We talked about it all the time.
Yeah, it was so good. It was so good. But so I feel like in terms of that, like my perspective now is a lot different from my perspective back in freshman year. So I don't know. I think it's great.
And Gavi, how did you find Bridges? How did you get involved?
I think in like a very opposite way to Shanjida.
Opposites attract.
I think I knew about Bridges before I came to NYU. Like I know I kind of just came to NYU, but there were certain things that I was really interested in, and one of them was interfaith, multi-faith engagement. And so I had looked up different Jewish organizations that worked with other groups around campus, and I had come across Bridges. So I think I didn't make it to any of the events my freshman year, but I went on the service trip, and that was my first Bridges event. Was our service trip, and we went to Oklahoma. And
Is that where you met?
That's where we met, in Oklahoma. And I came out from that trip, my first Bridges event, on the Bridges board. Yeah. Because I was like all in.
Wait, me too, freshman year, I came off the trip and I was on the board.
It was so fun.
Yeah, I think the trip is very transformative.
Okay, so explain to me how that brainwashing works. How does that work? It's a group of Jewish students, a group of Muslim students.
Like 10 and 10.
10 and 10 went to Oklahoma City.
Every year, the group goes to a place that
a disaster-ridden area
hit by a natural disaster and provides relief, and then in the evening does interfaith dialogue work.
Amongst ourselves, and sometimes with the
also
community as well. Yeah, exactly.
And does everybody know each other before they go, or no?
No. We met on the trip.
Yeah. You know what I find really interesting is that the dynamics every year changes so much. I remember my freshman year, we were in the airport right before the trip, and this is so like weird for me. It was so jarring. I saw just a circle of Jewish students and a circle of Muslim students, and no one was interacting. And I remember going up to the co-president at the time, Saad, and I was like, Saad, how's this trip gonna work? Like, no one's talking to each other. Like, what's the point? Like, I don't get it. Isn't the point for everyone to interact? And he had been on a trip the previous year, and he's like, just wait until the second or third day, you'll be mind blown. So I waited until the second and third day, and it was incredible. But I remember going forward every year after that, you didn't have those explicit separations anymore. Do you remember the Oklahoma trip?
I remember the meeting we had before the Oklahoma trip.
Like the orientation?
They brought us all together for an orientation in New York. And I remember I didn't really know anyone. Even out of the Jewish students, I didn't know many people and definitely didn't know any of the Muslim students. And I remember being like really blown away by people who were already friends. Like you knew already a lot of the Jewish students, and I was like, wow, people are really friends here. It's a little intimidating. But that's so different from the first time you went. Already such a huge change.
Yeah, I mean, the next few years that I went, I honestly didn't see any separations. Maybe because I was familiar with both sides, I guess. But it was just a very visceral and very explicit sort of difference every year. When you saw that, like my first year, you had people who were separated based on faith, and then the next year people were just kind of mingling, and it just gets better every year, I guess.
Okay, so we see that transformation. People in the airport, there's two separate groups, and then in the airport on the way back, everyone's talking to each other. So now when you come back to campus, how do you explain that to people? Or do you, like
so
people who used to hang out with
So
before,
hard.
like, why aren't you hanging out with me? Why are you hanging out with these other people? Like,
Yeah, that is.
does that happen? Do people look at you like,
You can
what
explain
happened?
something with words, but you can't like explain the feeling of this trip.
Yeah, it's not adequate.
You can't convey the bonding that happens.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I think it just has to do with place, like bringing everyone to a different environment where like you're alone in a new place where no one knows anything but each other.
But I think I can say one thing, and that's when people see sort of the interactions that we have, like when people will see me at the kosher calf or like Gavi at the IC, you know what I mean? That sort of kind of makes people perk up, and they'll be like, oh, like, well, how did that happen? Or, you know, like if I'm walking down the street with like Avi Rothfeld, who is like super tall, wears a kippah, you know what I mean? Like people will be like, huh, that's interesting. So then they'll approach me, like people from the IC who have never been exposed to bridges or who don't know about bridges, they'll approach me and they'll be like, that's interesting, like what is that? So I explain it to them, and so it's kind of like almost like leading by example, kind of, but it's like giving them a tidbit of what could possibly happen if they join, and then that kind of draws people in. And I think that the crux of bridges, like, you know, most of the great work that we do happens during the second semester after the trip, after the because I mean I feel like the trip just brings these, you know, you're 10 people from each faith kind of living together for an entire week, like 24/7, you know what I mean, like cooking together, cleaning together, doing construction together, praying together. It's inevitable that you'll be, you know, kind of like bonded for a very, very long time. And when people see sort of the kind of the remnants of that bond, well, not the remnants, that's the wrong word, kind of just when they see the bond on campus, they kind of feel jealous and kind of feel like, oh, that's interesting and maybe I should check it out. So I think that's really cool.
Okay, but what kind of backlash have you ever got any backlash or no?
I mean, I've heard certain things from people, and it's really invalidating at times because people don't understand the implications and the impact that these kinds of relationships have, and people just see it as, oh, you know, I mean, I feel like a lot of times when people talk about Muslim-Jewish interactions or dialogue or anything of that nature, they think about Israel and Palestine automatically, like that's the first thing you jump to. And so a lot of times when, you know, I invite people to certain events, or I don't know, when I talk about bridges, sometimes people will be like, oh, but, you know, why are you doing this? They're just like negative
Cynicism.
sort of. Yes, exactly. That's a good word.
Cynicism.
Yeah, but I think, and I talk about this experience a lot, but I think that the thing that kind of puts me at rest, and, you know, it's like you don't have to worry about what people say because the work you do is actually not just good, but it's necessary. It was when, and you know about this because you were there, the rally against Islamophobia that happened this past December, I think. It was kind of during midterms week, or was it finals week? I remember the night before there was a poster making party in the Islamic Center, and it was basically we were just making posters for the rally the next day.
Was there something that prompted the rally? What prompted the
Yeah,
rally?
it was just a lot of hateful rhetoric that was going around, especially with the presidential campaigns that were happening. It was, and I don't know, I feel like at that point there were a lot of incidents that were happening even in Manhattan, which was like really crazy. People who were starting to take off their hijabs, you know, like just a lot of things that were happening. And so
Being people afraid of identifying
yes,
publicly as
exactly.
Muslim.
And so there was a rally to kind of unite the student body and speak and it was organized by the Islamic Center and the Muslim Students Association. And so the night before there was a poster making party for the rally, and I remember we had a Bridges meeting. So it was the Bridges gingerbread gingerbread bridges. We were having like a contest. It was our last
Like,
event
we
of
could
the
say that
semester.
10 times fast.
So basically what happened was everyone who went to the gingerbread bridges competition, whatever, after the event was over, they just went straight to the Islamic Center, and Muslim, Jewish students, everyone just sat there making posters. And the next day, I remember being in the Kimmel, like just walking to the Kimmel staircase, like before the event was beginning, and just waiting to see kind of how the rally would happen, or who was going to attend. And I remember the first people walking in were my Jewish friends, people who had been on the trip with, people just from the Bronfman Center. I thought that was incredible. And when people are cynical or skeptical about the effect of something like bridges, like that's kind of the example that I point to. It's like in times of struggle, in times of despair, in times of frustration, anger, sadness, when people are able to kind of be in solidarity with each other, I think that is sort of the biggest testament to the success of something like bridges. So I thought that was the most powerful experience for me in college, and it's something that I talk about all the time. I remember I told my parents, I told everyone, and it's been amazing. It's been the reason why I think we do the work we do. This was just on a college level, and I can't even imagine how this would translate into the real world. This is just a stepping stone in the right direction. So, yeah.
Gavriella, any examples that you give to people when you confront cynicism? Is there anything that you can point to where you feel like, no, this is real. This is not just baking gingerbread, which is fun, but it has lasting impact.
Usually I point to our friendship, because when people are cynical about bridges or about interfaith work, they usually bring up really huge global issues. They bring up these unconquerable tasks that we have in the world, and it can really bring you down. And I don't know, Shanjida and I became really good friends.
Yeah. We were co-presidents this past year, and I mean, sometimes we don't even have to give examples of big things like the rally. It's like interpersonal relationships. Like every Tuesday morning, Gavi and I would have Tuesday morning breakfasts every Tuesday, like without fail. And during those meetings, or not even meetings, like during those meetups,
we tried to make it
yeah,
meetings.
it would be our like president's meetings, but
we never conquered anything.
We would talk
official,
about
everything.
Yeah, we would talk about everything, but
this is I think the testament of bridges. Like our relationship, the things that we were able to talk about changed so profoundly.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
We can talk about anything.
We have talked about like everything. You know what I mean?
Very hard issues, and like the big political global issues that people are cynical about. Maybe rightfully, they're very difficult. We can have conversations about, which is so cool.
Yeah, and we have come to realize that those difficult conversations are way, way more productive when it's two people talking one-on-one rather than in a group of strangers, you know what I mean? Because when strangers talk to each other, there's nothing at stake. There's nothing to lose. You'll go into a shouting match and like you won't even care because there's nothing to lose. But
there's
when you're
there's also like in a group setting, students especially often feel like they're representing
100%.
their faiths, and like they have to stand there and represent Judaism, which is a lot. But when you talk to someone one-on-one,
it's like I represent myself, and I think the conversations are much more productive, much more honest. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you that when people who have never seen this up front, when they hear you describe the authenticity of your friendship, the way that you are supported by each of your respective religious communities, and that the way concretely, your friendships are able to change the way many people feel and think. So many people would be in disbelief, honestly, in shock, because so much of the news that they get from campus life is all about controversy and conflict and people being marginalized and alienated. So it's just amazing. I'm just observing. It's just amazing to me that there is that difference. Do you feel that way when you talk to people outside or your home communities, when they're like, how's it going? Are you afraid to walk around?
Yeah, I mean, people are, it's a new thing for people. And I think part of the reason that is that we live in an increasingly globalizing world, right? America is, contrary to popular belief, America is becoming more and more religiously diverse and not more and more secular. And so when you talk about things like faith or religion, it's really important to be kind of honest. But I think a lot of times people have difficulty addressing things like faith because there isn't an open dialogue about faith. So I guess, for example, we've always been taught to not talk about money, religion, and politics at the dinner table, right? But I think people have kind of gotten over this phobia of talking about money and politics, but people have not gotten over this phobia about talking about religion. On college campuses and higher education, it's very, there's so much dialogue about identity, there's so much dialogue about sexuality, there's so much dialogue about politics. You have college Republicans, college Democrats, but there's not a lot of dialogue about religion. And I think part of the reason why is that religion is just such a private thing. It's in this private sphere, whereas everything else can kind of be translated into a public sphere. And I think once people kind of get over that initial fear of placing religion on a public platform, then dialogue can be a lot more conducive to, I think good effects.
Gavi, what about you? The difference between the way, it seems to me, so many people who are not in contact with campus life perceive the environment versus what you're describing.
I just want to tell them how wrong they are. I mean, I wish I could bring everyone on a Bridges trip. I wish I could bring everyone to a Bridges meeting, because the positivity in the air is incredible, and the desire for students to learn more about each other is amazing. People come to Bridges events, and I think the best
Right?
thing about them, it's exciting because it gives students a space to ask questions that
they had never asked before.
That they might not even feel like they're allowed to ask.
Exactly.
That might seem uncomfortable.
It's a very safe space, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, you're interacting with peers.
So let me ask you this: Do you feel that the campus climate, or even the climate in New York City now, does it feel like a safe space to you, a safe place to you? Particularly for Muslim New Yorkers, there have been. I mean, you referenced a few incidents over the summer. There were even more, and just curious if you're feeling that at all.
I mean, I feel it at home, where I live now, on Long Island, and I was just talking earlier with you about. I go to the library a lot now because I'm studying for my LSAT, and it's interesting because, I've grown up in New Hyde Park. I was there since I was in, I think, 5th grade. And I've been going to this library since, I think, 6th or 7th grade, up until high school. Then I moved to the city. But now that I'm back, I frequent that library a lot. And I never really felt uncomfortable or not allowed to be myself in that library, or just in New Hyde Park in general. But for some reason, actually for many reasons probably, I feel a lot more kind of conscious of my surroundings and more kind of tense. And maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I think I'm being paranoid because of things that have been happening around the world.
So in the library, what do you feel in the library?
Sure. So, it could be a trivial thing. It could be something that is just being made, my mind is just making up things. But I remember I was just sitting at the library, just working on a diagnostic, just taking a practice test. And there are a lot of empty tables, all around me, a lot of empty seats. And this guy walks in, and he's wearing a Donald Trump shirt, says "Make America Great Again," wearing the red hat, "Make America Great Again," looks straight at me, smirks at me, and sits right next to me. And I felt like it was kind of passive aggressive, but also kind of asserting his dominance over me. And that made me feel a little uncomfortable, but he didn't do anything wrong per se, but so that it's just kind of passive aggressive behavior that, like microaggressions that can potentially build up. These types of experiences can potentially build up and kind of snowball and have like detrimental effects. But I feel like, I mean, it's small things that are just adding up. It hasn't been anything huge, but huge.
And let's say for the Muslim student community at NYU, do you feel like people are taking more precautions, or or are they feeling more anxious or has anything happened on the campus itself that you know of?
I've been to the IC. A lot of what students at the IC are talking about, from what I hear, is like New York City events. So there have been like a few events within the last few months of like discrimination, and there have been a few murders. Like some terrible things have gone down in New York City that are definitely not little things. And I think they're threatening to the Muslim community. So that is affecting all the Muslim students at NYU.
We had a town hall right after the rally. And during the town hall, people sort of just sat around, and it was like a giant circle of just, not just Muslims, like people in general. And we had a bunch of Bridges members actually come. And during the town hall, people were just talking about terrible things that had happened to them. And again, a lot of it is just like microaggressions or passive-aggressive behavior towards Muslims. I remember walking, this is crazy. This was actually, so I was walking out of the library. Oh my God, I have so many bad things related to libraries. Library's a terrible place. I'm kidding.
Stay away from libraries.
I was walking out of the library, the Boast Library at NYU, and I think it was September 11th that day, or it was close to September 11th. And I was walking out, like walking in front of the Kimmel Building on West 4th Street, and this lady was walking past me, and I think this is before Donald Trump, before any of the political campaigns that were happening. So she was walking past me, and she's like, "Honey, you're in America. You don't have to wear that anymore." You know what I mean? And she said it really softly and in a really nice tone. And I realized that I come into contact with a lot of like mean people who are nice. I don't know how to explain that. Like they say it in a nice way, so you can't even and I'm also not a confrontational person at all. Like I'm a pretty nice person, so I was like, okay. I just kind of walked away and
oh my God.
Yeah, and also like a couple of weeks ago, I was you know where Amarino is? It's like this gelato place on University. So I was walking in front of Amarino with a friend, and this guy walks past me with a really cute dog, like the cutest dog I'd ever seen. And I just smile at the dog, and the guy walks past, and he's like, "Go home." And I was like, "Whoa! I was just nice to your dog. Like, why? You know what I mean?" And I remember the lady in front of me when the guy walks past. There was a woman in front of me, and she turns around. She's like, "Did he just say that? I'm so sorry." And so that was very reassuring and comforting for me. But incidents have happened. That have happened to me. It has. Like things have happened to other people as well. And I remember during the town hall, Emma Stein, who was a really good friend of ours, I remember she got up in the middle of the town hall and just like walked out. So, and I was like, okay, maybe she just had to go somewhere. So I remember after the town hall was over, I walk outside and I see her sitting next to the room that the town hall was happening, just sitting on the floor and crying. And I was like, Emma, what's wrong? And she was just so disturbed, I guess, that she just couldn't even speak. So I took her downstairs to the Islamic Center, and we just sat on a couch, and I let her kind of compose herself. And then she was like, Shanjida, everything that I was hearing was so reminiscent of what my grandparents went through during the Holocaust. And so I guess that was just empathy at its peak. You know what I mean? Like that is just, without these experiences that we go through in terms of Bridges, like these immersive experiences, like it's really hard for that type of empathy to really come about. So things have happened, but also good things have happened in response. Yeah.
When we were talking earlier, and I asked you what kinds of things we shouldn't talk about, you said, well, nothing political. But so I don't want to ask you your political opinions on anything. But what I do want to ask you is what it's like for you to having led this organization, but during times which feel politically tense.
So last year, we were supposed to run an event about Jerusalem, and just regarding the holiness that it encompasses for the Jewish and the Muslim faiths. And at the time, it was like a pretty tense time politically, and we ended up going back and forth, and we were like bouncing it back and forth, like, do we do this? Do we not do it? Are people gonna push us and ask questions that are inappropriate, that are hurtful and harmful to other students? Is it gonna be alienating? And we ended up bouncing this idea back and forth, I think, so many times that just in our unsurety, not being sure, our reluctance to do this event, we had so many productive dialogues. Like, we talked about this probably 5 meetings in a row with our whole board, and it led to an openness and like a necessity to talk about hard issues that we often do shy away from.
But at the same time, like, Bridges is not a political club. It's not a club about Israel and Palestine. It's not meant to create peace between, you know what I mean? But it is for people who are invested in sort of those types of topics or those areas, for people who have differing views, to put those, like, not in spite of those differences, but because of those differences, come together and like dialogue. Because, I mean, the world is just getting smaller. You know, you can't avoid people forever. You can't, like, you will always be in contact with people that you may not necessarily have intended to, you know, come in contact with. And I think it's really important to develop skills to honestly and truthfully dialogue, or just, it's so important to know people's stories, you know, and I think that's really important. That's what Bridges is all about.
Also, like, when we've gotten to times when like politics feel really heavy and there's a lot of tension in the world, having relationships that were already established helps a lot. Like, we're not trying to build these relationships at the peak and at the height of like fire and tension and conflict. We build them because we want to focus on faith and we want to learn about each other's religion, and then you inevitably enter a period of tension, and we can be stronger for it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a checkpoint. Like, when you're friends with someone, you never fall below that checkpoint. It's like you have this really strong foundation of friendship, and whatever hurdles may come your way, you're just ready to face it because you have this strong, you know, foundation of friendship and love.
Now, you're no longer co-presidents of this club.
Right, sadly.
Was it hard? But you can still have breakfast on Tuesday.
Yeah, I know, we will. After my LSAT.
Was it hard to find people to take over from you?
I don't.
Like, are you concerned about the next generation of this work, or do you feel like it's only getting stronger?
Yeah.
The demand is there, the interest is there.
Yeah.
I feel the opposite.
Really?
I always feel like college students are really excited to do
for sure.
dialogue work. So the next generation, like the incoming freshmen and sophomores who are becoming involved in Bridges, who have gone on their first trip, are really excited. They just want to learn more. They want to meet more people. They've like made one friend. They want to make another friend. But I'm more worried about like
exiting that
the
safe haven of higher education.
The next generation that's above. Like the
Meaning
world,
the world that you're about to
the
enter.
world that we're entering, the professional world, the adult world, where people like have solidified beliefs about one another and stay in their own world.
You know, before graduation, I remember just dreading the countdown to graduation because I knew that like once I leave college or once I leave NYU, I wouldn't have this structured sort of safe space to dialogue anymore. It would be a lot harder. It would be a lot less, I mean, I don't know, is it more organic in the real world or is it more organic in college? I don't really know, because I feel like in college it's structured, right? It's, you create this space, whereas in the real world, I don't really know how to explain it.
I think we're like past organic. Like we have to create situations for people of different faith backgrounds to be in the same room together. because they're usually not.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think about the fact that, like, we should have a Bridges in New Hyde Park where I live, but I don't know how to start something like that. You know? Yeah, you should. But, I feel like at NYU, I came to Bridges because I saw people's friendships, and people come to Bridges because they see my friendships or they see other people's friendships. But in a larger setting, like a community, it's harder for you to sort of show the positive effects of something like Bridges or something like interfaith dialogue. So that's something that I'm still figuring out. I know that in terms of my career, like, this is a path that I want to go down in terms of doing interfaith work.
Even as a lawyer.
Yeah. Inshallah, Bezrat Hashem. You know what I mean?
Gavi, you transitioned. You're no longer co-president of Bridges, but now you serve on the Multi-Faith Advisory Council, which is not just Jewish and Muslim, right? Students from all different faith backgrounds. Same or different for you?
Very different. People come to Bridges with really specific ideas. They come there because they want to talk politics, and then they're surprised that we don't. They come there because there's like a conflation of rhetoric between Jews and Muslims and how we view one another. There's assumptions about each other because of political tension, and multi-faith work is much different. You start from a point of how do we support one another. Bridges, we start from a point of how do I understand you as a person. Multi-faith work, I feel like, is more community-based, whereas interfaith work is more getting to know an individual or getting to know one single group.
Yeah.
So on the Multi-Faith Advisory Council, Shanjida was also on the Multi-Faith Advisory Council when she was in college.
Yeah. On the Multi-Faith Advisory Council, I kind of learned the surface level, almost like kind of skimming, and I need a lot more time to understand everyone because we're dealing with so many different faiths.
Yeah, I think there's nuance.
Yeah.
When you deal with two groups, like there's so many different aspects of the Muslim faith that I understand now that I just didn't even know existed before. The Multi-Faith Advisory Council, when you work with a lot of different faith groups at once, it's more about how can we globally support each other, how do we understand these issues together as faith communities.
Yeah.
If I were, let's say, a student at another university and felt like the things that you're talking about just feel so desirable but also distant, how do I do something like this on my own? What advice would you give to someone? And not just tactical steps, but any words of inspiration?
I think that you don't need a club to do dialogue. You know what I mean? Like, I remember there's a group on campus called Much, which is the Muslim-Christian Dialogue, and it was kind of formed.
MUCH.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It was formed
Cute.
like with Bridges in mind, I guess. Like Bridges was kind of the model. And the way that it was formed, and I'm sure this is how Bridges was formed as well, was that you just had a bunch of people, like it was just a Quran Bible study. I remember I went to these informal Quran Bible studies just in the evenings. We had like 4 people, maybe 2 Muslims, 2 Christians, just getting together and talking about passages in the Bible, and that kind of like grew, and it just attracted more and more people, and then eventually it became a club with its own budget. So you just really need to start small. If you feel like it's unattainable, it's because you're just dreaming too big right now. Just start out small. Just gather people who are interested and just do it on your own. You don't need a budget to do it. Just kind of do it on your own. Just start out small, yeah.
And in terms of gathering people, like students always come to Bridges who have just been brought there by a friend who didn't even know that they were interested in it until they were presented with it. Like everyone gets so excited to learn about other cultures and traditions. You just have to reach out and put the word out there that this is something you're interested in, and someone else will raise their hand and be like, wow, how did you come to be thinking about that? That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
10 years from now, let's say, when you're watching a rerun of this episode, okay? do you see yourselves as having kept in touch and enriched your friendship?
Yeah, duh, 100%. Like, no doubt about that.
We've already talked about each other's weddings.
Yeah, and I know that I can't plan my wedding on a Friday or a Saturday because, like, no Jews will come, you know what I mean? Like, we have details planned out. And, like, I'm just worried about the food, though. Kosher food's really expensive. You know what I mean? But
you can just, like, whatever, we'll work it out. You can
okay, sure. But yeah, like, for 100%, like, without a doubt, that we'll be not just in touch, we'll be very in each other's lives.
And lastly, was there anything that you felt was a particular success that you worked on? It doesn't have to be something that received wide publicity or involved hundreds or thousands of people, but when you look back, you say, okay, you know what? I accomplished this. This is something that I feel like I really accomplished. It's a mark of pride for me. It's something that maybe I didn't think that I would ever be able to do, but I did it.
I feel like one of the highlights of this past year was Jummah Shabbat that just happened.
That's exactly what I was thinking about. Were you thinking about the college students?
Yeah.
We just...
So basically, Jummah Shabbat is this annual immersive kind of event where you have basically Muslim students invite Jewish students to come to Jummah services, and
Which
then
is the Friday afternoon.
Yes. And exactly. And then that same evening, Jewish students invite Muslim students to come to Shabbat services, and it's just this awesome immersive experience. You have Jewish girls coming to Muslim girls to put on hijabs. It's just amazing. And then in the evening, you have just Muslim guys going to the Jewish guys and putting on kippahs. And you can't tell who's who. Like, you can't tell who's Jew and who's a Muslim. It's really amazing. It's really cool. But so every year we have this event, and this year we did it a little differently. We invited student delegates from other universities who either have Muslim-Jewish dialogue groups or an interfaith dialogue group, or who are just interested. Like, you don't even have to have a group. And we had a lot of interest in that. And so this year we had a pretty good group of people come to the event. And
how many campuses?
How many?
8 campuses, I think.
Brandeis, UVish.
And they all sent more than one person.
Yeah, and it was awesome. It was so great.
It was amazing, and we brought student leaders to come and experience what we've been working on for so long, and we also got so much inspiration from the work that students are doing on other campuses.
Yeah, for sure. It was just this collective growth. Wow. And yeah, it was really great because we know that the work that we do isn't exclusive to us anymore. It's a phenomenon basically, and hopefully it's only growing. This is just the beginning.
Well, I hope so,
Yeah.
and I think all of our viewers will be so inspired by the work that you've been doing and by your friendship. So I hope you enjoyed meeting Gavriella, Rubin, and Shanjida Chowdhury and hearing their perspectives. And please, if you have any ideas or thoughts you'd like to share on anything Gavi or Shanjida had to say, please be in touch with me at yehudasarna@jbstv.org. Thank you for watching Millennial Perspectives. I'm Yehuda Sarna. See you next time right here on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.